What would you do if the airplane you're flying in suddenly exploded in midair? This is the story of Jack, who finds himself trapped in that exact nightmare. It was Jack's first time flying, and he was enjoying every moment of the trip. But suddenly, the entire plane began shaking violently. All the passengers panicked. Before anyone could even process what was happening, one of the plane's wings exploded with a massive blast. The explosion ripped the aircraft into two pieces. Many passengers were sucked out by the powerful air pressure. Only those who had their seatbelts fastened remained in their seats. But now the plane was completely out of control. It kept plunging toward the ground as everyone prayed for a miracle. A few moments later, the aircraft crash-landed on a deserted island, skidding across the ground before coming to a stop. Then another massive explosion rocked the wreckage. When Jack finally opened his eyes, he realized he was still alive. He immediately started searching for other survivors. But after walking a short distance, all he could see was the endless ocean. Just then, he heard people calling for help. He ran toward the voices and soon found dozens of injured survivors. Jack was the only doctor on the island, so he immediately began treating the wounded. But suddenly, a terrifying sound caught his attention. He noticed that one of the plane's broken wings was about to collapse on top of a trapped pregnant woman. Without wasting a second, Jack rushed toward her and pulled her to safety just before the wing came crashing down. Moments later, another huge explosion killed several of the injured survivors nearby. After witnessing the horrifying scene, Jack walked alone into the jungle and tried to stitch up his own wound. But the injury was on the back of his arm, where he couldn't reach it himself. Just then, a woman named Kat happened to walk by. Jack asked her to help stitch up his wound. As Kat stitched his arm, she couldn't help but smile, because Jack wasn't feeling any pain at all. That night, all the remaining survivors gathered near the tail section of the plane. Jack told everyone that they needed to find the front half of the aircraft. If it was still intact, they might be able to use its emergency equipment to send out a distress signal. Then Kat revealed that earlier that day, she had seen smoke rising from the other side of the island. Maybe that's where the front half of the plane had crashed. Just as everyone was making plans to head out, a terrifying roar suddenly echoed from deep within the jungle. Every survivor immediately turned toward the sound. Moments later, trees in the distance began snapping one after another. That was enough for everyone to realize that some kind of enormous creature was living on the island. Fortunately, the beast didn't show itself, and after a while, everything became quiet again. The next morning, the survivors gathered to discuss what they had heard the night before. Some believed it was a dinosaur. Others thought it was a giant monster. Everyone was terrified of whatever was hiding out there. Jack was scared too. But he knew that if they wanted any chance of getting off the island alive, they had to find the cockpit. So he set out into the dangerous jungle with Charlie and Kat. Not long after they started searching, heavy rain began pouring from the sky, making it even harder to find the wreckage. Back at the plane, the remaining survivors also sensed that the mysterious creature had returned. But Jack's group had no idea. After wandering through the jungle for hours, they finally spotted the front section of the aircraft. Jack climbed inside and discovered that all the passengers had died in their seats. He then tried to open the cockpit door, but the handle was jammed. Suddenly, the door swung open on its own. The three of them jumped in shock as the pilot's corpse fell out right in front of them. After that, Jack entered the cockpit and began searching for a distress transmitter. That's when they made a surprising discovery. The co-pilot was still alive. He was badly injured, but alive. The co-pilot explained what had happened before the crash. According to him, while flying over the mysterious island, all communication systems suddenly failed. He tried to change course and steer away, but moments later, an unknown force triggered an explosion inside the aircraft. After that, he lost consciousness. Based on his estimate, they were now stranded thousands of miles away from civilization on this mysterious island. Then the co-pilot suddenly remembered that the aircraft carried a backup wireless communication system, but after searching for it, they discovered that the device had already been damaged. Hearing that, Jack's last hope disappeared. He decided it was time to return to the others. But just then, the same terrifying roar echoed through the jungle once again. The entire aircraft started shaking violently. Everyone rushed to the windows. Outside, a gigantic shadow moved past the plane. Each of its footsteps made the wreckage tremble. The co-pilot stepped closer to the glass to get a better look, and in the very next second, something grabbed him and dragged him outside. Kat screamed in terror. Before Jack could help her, the aircraft began shaking even harder. Then the wreckage broke loose from the tree it was stuck in and crashed to the ground. Without wasting a second, Jack grabbed the transmitter and led everyone back into the jungle. The monstrous roars behind them only made their fear worse. Thankfully, the creature didn't follow them. Relieved, the three survivors made their way back to camp. But as soon as they arrived, they found two men fighting. Jack and Michael rushed over and pulled them apart. After questioning them, they learned that James believed Curly was somehow responsible for the plane crash. His reasoning was simple. Everyone sitting near Curly had died, yet Curly was the only survivor. Hearing the accusation, Curly exploded with anger, and another fight nearly broke out. Luckily, Kat shouted at both of them and managed to calm everyone down. She then revealed that they had found the distress transmitter. The problem was that it was badly damaged. If they wanted to call for help, they first needed to repair it. The camp fell silent. Nobody knew how to fix such equipment. Finally, Curly stepped forward and said he could do it, but James immediately started arguing with him again. This time, Jack had enough. He warned James to keep quiet before things got worse. James finally backed off. A short while later, some good news arrived. Curly revealed that he had once served as a military communications officer. Since the transmitter came from a military aircraft, repairing it wasn't too difficult for him. He immediately got to work. After some time, he successfully brought the device back online. But there was another problem. The battery was almost dead. If they wanted the signal to reach anyone, they would have to carry the transmitter to a much higher location. When Kat asked how high they needed to go, Curly pointed toward a massive rock formation deep inside the jungle. The moment she saw it, her face dropped. She had barely escaped death earlier and had no desire to risk her life again. Unfortunately, they had no other choice. So, without telling Jack, Kat secretly headed into the jungle with 4 other survivors. Along the way, James suddenly caught up to them. He intentionally shoved Kat aside and pushed ahead by himself. His selfish behavior made Kat dislike him even more. What she didn't know was that this same man would eventually save their lives. After a difficult climb through the rocky terrain, the group finally reached the dense jungle. Even then, James continued blaming Curly for the crash. That's when they heard a strange sound behind them. The noise was so disturbing that everyone instantly froze. Slowly, they turned toward the bushes ahead. Something dangerous was moving through the vegetation at incredible speed, and it was coming straight toward them. The moment they saw it moving through the bushes, everyone panicked and started running for their lives. But strangely, James didn't move an inch. He stood completely calm, without the slightest hint of fear on his face. Once everyone else had gotten a safe distance away, he pulled out his pistol and opened fire. But whatever that creature was, it was no ordinary animal. Several bullets hit it, yet it barely seemed affected. Then, by pure luck, one of James's shots struck a weak spot. The creature collapsed and died instantly. Soon, everyone gathered around the body, and what they saw left them stunned. It wasn't a monster at all. It was a massive polar bear. But that discovery only raised even more questions. How could a polar bear possibly survive on a hot, jungle-covered island? And more importantly, how had James managed to bring a gun onto a passenger plane? Before anyone could question him, James explained everything himself. He claimed he had found the pistol on the body of a dead police officer after the crash. To prove it, he even showed them the officer's badge. That eased some of the suspicion, and the group continued toward the mountain. Then suddenly, the signal device picked up a full connection. Excited, Curly immediately tried to send a distress signal, but he quickly realized something strange. The rescue frequency was already active. That meant someone else on the island was transmitting signals. The discovery made no sense. How could another person be living on such a remote island? Everyone was still trying to process it when a woman's voice suddenly came through the radio. After listening carefully, they realized she was speaking French. At first, everyone thought it was a rescue team. Hope instantly returned. They asked the French-speaking girl to communicate with them, but moments later, their excitement vanished. It wasn't a rescue team. It was simply an old distress recording from a woman begging for help. Then the signal suddenly disappeared. Curly checked the transmission data and uncovered something even more disturbing. According to the records, the signal had been repeating for 16 years, and in all that time, nobody had ever responded. That meant the outside world had never even known those stranded people existed. The revelation terrified everyone. Questions flooded their minds. What was the mysterious creature on the island? How had a polar bear ended up there? Why had their airplane suddenly exploded in midair? The more they thought about it, the more convinced they became that the island was hiding a terrible secret. Afterward, everyone returned to camp. To avoid causing panic, they lied and told the others that the signal had simply failed. That night, Michael's dog suddenly started barking wildly. The noise immediately alarmed everyone. Jack grabbed a flashlight and cautiously moved toward the darkness, but all he could see were shadows and hear strange noises. Then James carelessly switched on a powerful searchlight. The next second, everyone froze. Several huge wild boars were hiding nearby. Panic spread through the camp. People ran in every direction. Fortunately, instead of attacking, the boars turned and disappeared back into the jungle. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief, but the next morning brought another problem. The survivors discovered that all of the remaining food supplies were gone. James became furious and accused one of the heavier survivors of eating more than his share. Within seconds, a fight broke out. Jack quickly stepped in and separated them, but he knew the real problem remained. If they didn't find food soon, hunger would tear the group apart. Just then, a knife suddenly landed near James. Everyone turned around. A bald man suggested hunting the wild boars for food. James immediately dismissed the idea. He argued that killing such huge animals with a small knife was impossible. Without saying a word, the bald man opened his suitcase. Inside were several large hunting knives. Even James looked surprised. Without wasting time, the three of them headed into the jungle to track the boars. After wandering through the dense forest for a while, the bald man suddenly sensed something. He raised his hand, signaling the others to stop. Examining a nearby tree, he spotted fresh boar markings. The trail was close. A short time later, they quietly reached the area. The bald man explained his plan using hand signals. He wanted Kat to attack from the front while Michael circled from the side, but Michael misunderstood and suddenly shouted in frustration. The noise alerted the boar instantly. The animal charged straight at them. The bald man jumped out of the way. Michael wasn't so lucky. He got hit and thrown aside. Thankfully, the boar didn't attack again, and Michael escaped with only minor injuries. The bald man was badly shaken too. After resting for a while, Kat suggested returning to camp, but he refused to give up. He told them to head back while he continued tracking the animal alone. Reluctantly, Kat and Michael started walking back. Then, Kat suddenly stopped. Without saying a word, she began taking off her pants. Michael Michael was completely confused. But a second later, Kat climbed a nearby tree. She wanted to get higher ground to check the signal device. While Michael waited below, Kat tried securing the transmitter near the top. Suddenly, a terrifying roar echoed through the jungle. The sound frightened her so badly that she dropped the device. Looking down from the tree, she spotted the same mysterious creature roaming nearby. Meanwhile, the bald man continued tracking the boar. Then he heard it moving through the bushes ahead. He rushed toward the sound. But the next moment, the boar's grunt turned into a horrifying scream. Trees began shaking violently. A monstrous roar thundered through the forest. The bald man's blood ran cold. He was so terrified that he forgot how to run. Then the giant creature stepped out directly in front of him. Meanwhile, Kat and Michael had already returned to camp. Kat quickly told Jack everything that had happened. She feared the bald man had become the creature's latest victim. Hearing that, Jack's face darkened. Then he noticed movement in some nearby bushes. Thinking the monster had reached the camp, he rushed into the jungle. But as soon as he entered the forest, the bald man suddenly emerged from the trees. He was carrying a dead wild boar over his shoulder. Fresh blood covered his clothes, making it obvious he had survived some kind of violent encounter. That night, everyone gathered together and prayed for those who had died in the crash. During the conversation, Michael asked the bald man if he had actually seen the monster. The man stayed silent for a moment. Then he calmly replied that he hadn't seen anything. But Michael didn't believe him. For now, food was no longer a problem. However, a new crisis had appeared. Their remaining supply of fresh water was running dangerously low. They could hunt animals for food, but they couldn't survive long on seawater. If they wanted to stay alive, they had to contact a rescue team. So, without telling anyone, Curly secretly returned to the mountain to search for a signal once again. The moment the transmitter started working, someone attacked him from behind and knocked him unconscious. Oddly enough, the attacker didn't kill him. Instead, they smashed the signal device and disappeared. After everything that had happened, Curly became convinced of one thing. Someone else was living on the island, and whoever it was, they didn't want anyone escaping. Determined to uncover the truth, Curly set out alone the very next day to explore the island. After walking for hours, he eventually stopped at the shoreline to rest. That's when he noticed something strange. Partially buried beneath the sand was a thick steel cable. Curious, he immediately started pulling it out. A moment later, he realized one end of the cable disappeared straight into the ocean. The discovery left him confused. Then he noticed that the cable also stretched toward the jungle. For the first time in days, Curly felt a spark of hope. Without hesitation, he began following the cable deeper into the forest. After a while, something on the ground caught his attention. He crouched down and saw a thin metal wire stretched across the path. Anyone could tell it was part of a trap. From that point on, Curly moved forward carefully. But the moment he took another step, click, the trap activated instantly. A hidden snare yanked him into the air. At the same time, a sharp wooden branch pierced straight through his thigh. The pain was unbearable. Dangling helplessly above the ground, Curly screamed in agony. For several moments, he could do nothing but struggle. Finally, gritting his teeth, he grabbed the branch and ripped it out of his leg. Blood poured from the wound. The pain was so intense that he lost consciousness. As the hours passed, night slowly fell over the island. Much later, Curly's eyes finally opened. But before he could call for help, a mysterious man suddenly appeared. Without saying a word, the stranger cut the rope holding him. The next second, Curly crashed headfirst onto the ground. Dazed and barely conscious, he could only make out the silhouette of a man walking toward him. Then everything went black again. The following morning, Curly woke up. For some reason, he had a terrible feeling that something horrible was about to happen at the camp. Ignoring the pain in his injured leg, he immediately started running back. But he was already too late. A nightmare had begun unfolding at the camp. Suddenly, a pregnant woman named Anna woke from her sleep. As she looked down at her stomach, terror filled her eyes. Her baby was gone. Moments later, she heard the sound of a baby crying somewhere nearby. Panicking, she followed the sound. The crying eventually led her to the bald man. One of his eyes was bruised black, and he was muttering strange things to himself. Anna ignored him and continued following the cries. A short distance away, she found a baby carriage. The crying seemed to be coming from inside. Gathering her courage, she slowly pulled back the white cloth covering it. What she saw made her blood run cold. There was no baby inside, only pieces of flesh. The horrifying sight caused Anna to scream at the top of her lungs. Hearing the scream, Charlie immediately rushed over. But by then, Anna had completely lost control. She was attacking anyone who came near her. Thankfully, Charlie managed to calm her down before anyone got hurt. At first, everyone assumed Anna had suffered some kind of terrifying nightmare, but then they noticed something disturbing. There was blood all over her hands. That discovery spread fear throughout the camp. The next morning, Jack carefully examined Anna's injuries. After checking her hands, he finally found an explanation. In her panic, Anna had clenched her fists so tightly that her fingernails had dug deep into her palms. That was where the blood had come from. That revelation brought a huge sigh of relief to everyone. But later that same night, while Anna was asleep, something terrifying happened. She suddenly woke up screaming. It felt as if someone was stabbing her stomach with a knife. Hearing her cries, the others rushed over immediately. But when they arrived, there was nobody there. Shaken and terrified, Anna insisted that someone had just attacked her. However, when Jack pulled back the blanket and checked her stomach, he couldn't find a single wound, not even a scratch. Jack assumed that the stress of her pregnancy was causing vivid nightmares and hallucinations, so he didn't take the incident too seriously. Instead, he told her to take some medicine and and try to rest. The moment Anna heard that, she exploded with anger. She felt like nobody believed her anymore, especially Jack. Furious and heartbroken, she packed her things and stormed out of the camp, disappearing into the jungle. Charlie couldn't stand by and watch. Without wasting a second, he ran after her. A short while later, Anna suddenly doubled over in pain. The pain in her stomach had become unbearable. Seeing her condition, Charlie panicked and rushed back toward the camp to get Jack. But on the way, he ran into Jim. Charlie quickly explained the situation and sent him to bring Jack instead. What Charlie didn't realize was that this decision would soon turn into a disaster. Meanwhile, Anna's pain slowly began to ease, and she and Charlie started heading back toward camp. That's when they saw Jim again, but something felt wrong. The strangest part was that he hadn't brought Jack with him. Instead, he just stood there, staring at Anna with an unsettling look in his eyes. At that same moment, Curly finally limped back into camp. He immediately told Jack about the shocking discovery he'd made. According to him, they weren't alone on the island. Someone else was living there. Before Jack could even process the information, the bald man came running into camp. Completely out of breath, he revealed another terrifying secret. A survivor from the plane crash had been hiding from everyone this entire time. His name was Jim. The color drained from Jack's face. Instantly, he realized something terrible was about to happen. Without hesitation, he grabbed the bald man and rushed into the jungle to find Anna and Charlie. But they were already too late. When they arrived, all they found were signs of a struggle. Anna and Charlie were gone. The bald man suggested returning to camp first to gather supplies. But Jack was overwhelmed with guilt. He couldn't stop thinking that if he had trusted Anna from the beginning, none of this would have happened. Driven by regret, he charged into the jungle alone and began searching frantically. After a while, he noticed something strange. No matter which direction he walked, he kept ending up in the same place. It was as if the jungle itself had turned into a giant maze. Eventually, the bald man and the others caught up with him, and the search resumed. Thankfully, they soon found a torn piece of Charlie's clothing on the ground. That confirmed they were heading in the right direction. But then they reached a fork in the path. Both trails contained footprints. With no better option, the group decided to split up. The bald man went one way, while Jack and Kate headed down the other path. Unfortunately, their troubles were far from over. A heavy rainstorm suddenly rolled in. Within minutes, tracking Charlie became even harder. After wandering through the jungle for what felt like hours, Jack spotted another torn piece of Charlie's clothing. Now he knew they were getting close. Then, out of nowhere, he heard Anna scream. The cry echoed through the forest. Without hesitation, Jack sprinted toward the sound and started climbing a steep hillside. Kate followed right behind him, but in his desperation, Jack lost his footing. His hand slipped. The next second, he tumbled down the rocky slope. Groaning in pain, he slowly pushed himself up. That's when he saw Jim standing directly in front of him. Without saying a word, Jim kicked him hard in the chest. Then he warned Jack that if he didn't stop searching, Charlie would die. Jack ignored the threat. Instead, he grabbed Jim's leg and threw him aside. Enraged, he charged forward. But Jim was far stronger than he looked. He easily dodged Jack's punch and fired back with a brutal combination of strikes. Within seconds, Jack was on the ground. Then Jim delivered one final devastating kick. Everything went black. Several minutes later, Kate managed to wake him up. But the moment Jack regained consciousness, he insisted on continuing the search. Kate tried to reason with him. The rain had already washed away most of the tracks. Finding Charlie now would be nearly impossible. Jack refused to listen. Determined to keep going, he pushed deeper into the jungle. Left with no choice, Kate followed. After searching for a long time, they finally came across a gigantic tree. And there, hanging high above the ground, was Charlie. Jack's heart nearly stopped. He rushed forward and quickly cut him down. But the moment Charlie hit the ground, the truth became painfully clear. He wasn't breathing. Jack immediately began trying to revive him, but nothing worked. Charlie showed no signs of life. Kate broke down in tears. Yet Jack refused to give up. Again and again, he pounded on Charlie's chest. Still nothing. Then, in one final desperate attempt, Jack delivered another powerful strike. Suddenly, Charlie gasped. His lungs filled with air. He was alive. And that's where part 1 of the story comes to an end. But part 2 is going to be even more intense, because once Charlie wakes up, he'll reveal terrifying secrets about the jungle. Secrets so horrifying that they'll leave everyone speechless. What happens next? Write part 2 inches in the comments if you want to hear the rest of the story.